Good morning. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. If you haven't already, please put your electronic equipment on silent, as I always ask. Joining us today, Fred Strathmeyer, representing Russ Redding, the Secretary of Agriculture, Jen Langen, representing Joe Torsella, State Treasurer, and Kristen Heidingsfelder, representing Revenue Secretary Dan Hassel. Thank you all for being here. Quorum of the board members being present, I will call today's proceedings to order. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The board held an executive session yesterday, Tuesday, February 5th, to discuss personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters being considered by the board today. Additionally, I'd like to announce that the Gaming Control Board will hold a public hearing on February 20th regarding the casino license renewal of Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, the operator of the Parks Casino in Bucks County. The hearing will begin at 10 o'clock in the morning at the council chambers in Bensalem Township on 2400 Byberry Road, Bensalem, Pennsylvania. Citizens and community groups and elected officials who wish to present oral testimony, which will become part of the evidentiary record in this matter, will be able to register by clicking on the hearing notice under Quick Links section on the homepage of the Gaming Control Board website. Written comments are to be mailed to the Gaming Control Board at Post Office Box 69060, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 17106, to the attention of the board clerk. Comments can also be faxed to the board prior to the deadline at 717-265-7416 or emailed to boardclerk@pa.gov. Deadline for registering to speak at the hearing and for receipt of public comments on the Parks Casino renewal is Tuesday, February 19th at noon. Before we begin today, I'd like to take a moment, it's a kind of a sad day for all of us here, to announce that this might be, probably will be, Commissioner Dick Jewell's last time with us on the board, and we will be presenting with him the resolution later. I'd just like to make a couple of comments, and I've been on this board for something over 3 years. Dick's been on for about 4. He has made just immense contributions to this board over the last several years. The two of us, I can say, and I can probably speak for others, we've become close friends and great colleagues. And I, for one, tremendously appreciate the wisdom and judgment that he's brought to our deliberations. And I can say, having worked closely with him now for over 3 years, that you have just such a clear and crystal clear sense of what the public interest involves, and it's been just a joy to work with you, Dick. I don't know if anybody else has comments they'd like to offer.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to echo what Chairman Barish said. I've been on the board now for 2 years, and I appreciate my good friend Dick Jewell's wisdom and counsel on issues, not just about gaming, but we've had a few cigars together, and we've talked about politics and lots of other things. So I just want to thank him for his friendship and wish him the very best. And hopefully, Dick, you'll come back and see us.
Any other?
Agreed.
Any other comments?
Double agreed.
Double agreed.
Okay, then I'll just triple agree.
Okay, you got triple and a double, Dick. So, proceed.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, David, and thank you very much. This has been a wonderful opportunity in what's been a somewhat long life. It's soon to be 74 years of age. I've had a chance to do many things with my law degree and my interests in public policy, public service. Public service came a little bit later in my life, but I've enjoyed it immensely. I can assure you now, based on my experience, I actually did a radio interview last night in a Pittsburgh radio station asking for my reflections on serving on this board. And that is the vision of Ed Rendell, and it was Ed's vision. And let's be honest about that, has been fulfilled and then some. The Commonwealth today, out of the 30 states that have brick and mortar, and now we've expanded obviously, but the brick and mortar casinos is, out of 30 states, second in the nation in the amount of money that's bet or the handle, second only to Nevada. But first in the amount of tax revenue returned to the Commonwealth and redistributed within the Commonwealth for a myriad of needs and good reasons, including primarily property tax relief. And that also fulfills a vision of it. The state legislature worked hard in 2004 to come together. That must have been an interesting time because it's hard to put major legislation together. Lots of folks have views and opinions. And some of my colleagues that are sitting up here today were voters in that legislature that originally, in 2004, came up with what's now we call Title IV. Expanded in 2010, and of course with Act 42 a little over a year ago. I'd also like to say a couple words, and this won't be long, about the folks who serve in this agency that is the Gaming Control Board. We have 298 folks as of today, and I've met some outstanding lawyers, IT folks, administrators. Kevin O'Toole has got extraordinary amount of experience. Cyrus Petrie, extraordinary amount of experience that they brought with them from other states and other circumstances that have enriched the public purpose of the protection of the safety and the suitability, especially of the folks who are licensees, and to ensure that the games are fair. And my experience tells me that all of those legislative objectives have been achieved and are being achieved. And finally, as we sit here today, as you know, different folks have different appointments from the leadership of the House and the governor of the Commonwealth. We have 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I could not tell the difference in all my years. I've never seen such a what I'll call bipartisan or nonpartisan set of colleagues, including colleagues that have served Greg Feit, others on the board, and left when their time was up, just trying to ensure that the purpose of the legislation was carried out. So with those thoughts and with a great deal of thankfulness that I have as a human being for this opportunity, both the experience with the agency, and I thank the Speaker of the House and the House Caucus for the appointment not quite 4 years ago. I leave you with great thanks and also a great respect for the members of the bar, a discrete group of members of the bar that practice before us on a recurring basis and that make great arguments and keep Cyrus busy making great arguments too, but back and forth. And the level of cooperation needed in the regulatory process has been extraordinary. We do stand on the shoulders of New Jersey and Nevada and some other states that had a lot of experience. We're able to make use of that experience and also to expand that experience with our own. 53% of the folks that work at the agency have been here over 10 years. The longevity is extraordinary. And to our Chief Counsel, Doug, thank you very much for your guidance and wisdom. Steve Cook, for your leadership too. And to Bill Ryan, who was chairman when I came on. We had 3 chairmen at one time that had served. We had Greg Feit, we had Bill Ryan, and then he was succeeded by Dave Barish. I thank them for their wisdom and their leadership. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Dick. We have a board resolution regarding your service, Dick. May I have a motion regarding the resolution for Commissioner Jewell?
Mr. Chairman, it is with great honor and privilege and pleasure that I move that this board adopt Resolution PGCB 2019-1 EXE honoring Commissioner Richard G. Jewell for his service to this board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. First order of business is a public hearing involving Presque Isle Downs for the issuance of a sports wagering certificate. Oh, thank you. Before we begin, I just want to make sure the record is clear. Commissioner Sean Logan is on the telephone from Pittsburgh. Are you there, Sean?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we had that for the quorum purposes. Okay.
It's sunny and 80 here.
Okay, okay. Before we begin, I'd ask everyone who's going to speak today to please state and spell your name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. And additionally, I'd ask all non-attorney witnesses at this point to stand and be sworn.
I do.
Petitioners may begin.
Chairman Barish, members of the board, good morning. I'm Kevin Hayes from the law firm of Doherty Hayes. I appear before you this morning on behalf of PID LLC and Churchill Downs Incorporated in support of their petition for a sports wagering certificate. Last month, PID was approved by this board for a Category 1 slot machine license and began operations of that facility last month. Appearing with me today is Kevin O'Sullivan, who is Vice President and General Manager of Presque Isle Downs, Dave Kuick, who's Director of Slots, Kathy Beating, who's Senior Counsel and Corporate Compliance Officer, Carter Vance, who's in the audience, and Alan Stremmel, who's Vice President of Sports Online Gaming at Churchill Downs. At this time, I'll hand it over to Alan Stremmel, who will begin the presentation.
Alan Stremmel, ALANSTREMEL. Mr. Chairman and the board, we're very excited to be here with Presque Isle, Churchill Downs. Thank you. So, to Mr. Chairman and the board, we are very excited and enthusiastic to be here with Presque Isle, Churchill Downs, and the Bet America brand. Just want to say initially to Susan Hensel and Sean Hannon in the Licensing Bureau, thank you very much for the hard work and cooperation as we've gone through this licensing process. With Presque Isle Downs, we're very excited about the enthusiasm of the sports community and fans within the region of our property. And we're excited to start the process of bringing our sports wagering kiosks to Presque Isle Downs, as we have done to our two properties in Mississippi. So Bet America is the CDI brand for wagering at Presque Isle, which will be expanding nationwide and in other properties. So we have entered into a partnership with SB Tech to provide our risk management and bookmaking services. They are live in 21 markets, excuse me, with risk management, sports wagering platform, and a detailed sports wallet system. We believe it's a very robust sports wagering market and offering, including bet types and sports offering. Our compulsive gaming and game integrity programs are being expanded to include sports betting on site. We'll continue to grow our self-exclusion age verification program, and all marketing materials will include the 1-800-GAMBLER tagline. SB Tech continues to develop information on irregular suspicious wagering, as gaming integrity is important to us. I will continue to actively communicate with feed delays to provide the most rigorous event management.
At this time, we're going to turn it over to Dave Kuick, who is the Vice President of Slot Operations at Presque Isle Downs, to talk a little bit about the proposed sportsbook details at the facility. Dan?
Dan Kuick. It's D-A-N-C-U-I-C. As you can see on page 6 of the presentation, that's our proposed sportsbook launch details. In phase 1, our plans are for a 1,275 square foot sportsbook location to be constructed in existing casino space, and that is in addition to 317 square feet in sports wagering kiosk space. The primary sportsbook location is going to be adjacent to our existing poker room and simulcast area, in hopes to pick up some synergies between the three. We will also be rolling out 50 self-betting sports wagering kiosks and adding an additional 50 large flat-screen high-definition televisions throughout the property. They'll be utilized to display sporting events as well as customizable odds boards to showcase pre-match and live wagering options. And then in phase 2 of the sportsbook rollout, we will have our online and mobile launch where we'll be offering online and mobile account wagering. In page 7, you will see the present sportsbook design plan. There's some colors on this page. The blue is where construction and enhancements will be taking place. The red is the actual layout of the kiosk locations. And as you will notice, near the new sportsbook feature area, you'll see a larger concentration of betting kiosks in that area. And I want to point out that that area is our non-smoking area. If you look out onto the main area, the main floor, we have 2 bars out there that you see kiosks centered around. Those will be our smoking kiosk locations to service our smoking guests. If you go into the next pages 8 through 12, they are architect renderings of those areas you saw on the previous page in blue. Page 8 showcases the feature sportsbook area. That's the one that will be located next to the poker and the simulcast. Page 9 is the sportsbook enhanced bar, which is located next to that area as well. You can see that there is TVs added to that as well as sports betting odds boards. Page 10 is the south entry to our sportsbook. Again, sticking with the same theme, we will be putting odds boards around there and TVs to display sports to draw people into that area. Page 11 is an enhanced version of our current center bar. We will be adding large TVs to the top of that bar on existing facade. And staying with that theme, we have our bar 90. It's the enhanced bar 90. The TVs added across the top of that to the existing facade just to support the sports viewing. With that concludes our presentation.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation. We're happy to field any questions from members of the board or from Enforcement Council related to the petition and this presentation.
Thank you. Questions from Enforcement Council?
Only a couple. Cyrus Petrie, P-I-T-R-E. With regard to the positions, my understanding is that this will be strictly kiosks on the gaming floor and for the sports wagering. Is that correct?
Well, in terms of for the guest experience, Kathy Beeding, B-E-E-D-I-N-G, Kathy with a C. In terms of the guest experience, the main interface will be with the kiosks.
Okay.
But certainly there will be available customer service in the cage for those guests as well.
Okay, because in your petition you estimated about 10 employment positions within Presque Isle that will be added. What type of positions are you looking at adding?
Well, I can tell you from our experience in Mississippi, where we opened 2 sports books in facilities that are a fraction of the size of Presque. We've been in operation since August 23rd, and so far at one property, at Riverwalk, we've added about 11 positions. Revenue audit, the vast majority of those have been in the cage. And about 30 to 40% of the workload for all cage employees is related to sportsbooks. So we have, even though the kiosks are certainly the main interface that the guests want to use, in fact, we have about 50% of market share in the markets in which we operate in Mississippi. And I think that's a testament to the fact that our guests love these kiosks. And the ability to make a 20-game parlay on a kiosk is, and do that yourself in front of the screen, is a much more preferable and delightful experience than trying to relay all that information to a cage cashier. We also hired some additional folks in security for the count and the drop, and 2 new slot attendants to do voucher pouch pays during peak hours, and then IT assets as well.
Okay. Do you anticipate, I know you're not removing any slots or table games from the floor. Do you anticipate having to relocate any table games and slots?
Yes.
Dan, you want to handle that?
Yes. If you look at the layout, there's a lot of space in the layout. So the slots and things that will be displaced by the sportsbook area and some of the small kiosk areas, those could easily be picked up in some of those more spacious areas which we intend.
Okay. You have an estimate about how many tables or slots you're going to be relocating?
The tables won't be touched at all.
Okay.
The slots, we're looking at about 69.
Okay. All right. And I also know that you anticipate being licensed in New Jersey, I believe, to offer sports wagering?
Yes, we actually went live,
did?
in soft play on Friday.
Okay.
And we're operating pursuant to a transactional waiver in that jurisdiction in partnership with Golden Nugget Atlantic City.
Okay. And is that with kiosk also?
That's a purely interactive,
Purely interactive?
yeah, venture in New Jersey. So mobile and desktop only.
Okay. And so far, no issues?
I think that whenever you launch a new product, there's always a little steps and bumps along the road, and our experience in New Jersey has been no different. This is a brand new venture for Churchill Downs. We've been in the interactive space for a long time on the parimutuel side, but this is our first foray into online casino, online sportsbook, purely interactive. And so certainly we've had a lot of learning moments. Cyrus and I would be remiss if I didn't point that out. But they have been learning moments. We have a great relationship with the DGE and the regulators there. And we have high hopes of coming out of soft play today and going live on a 24-hour basis later today.
Okay. How about in Mississippi? How are things now? I mean, you talked about speed bumps in the beginning. Have things evened out now?
Yes, for sure. Again, we still have learning moments. Our partner SB Tech, very sophisticated and has operated in the international space for well over 10 years. Yet when we partnered with them, it was their first entry into the U.S. market. And so translating from international into the U.S. market, especially a new U.S. market, where regulators are learning, operators are learning, there hasn't been without some moments, Cyrus. But they've been all good, and no complaints from guests.
Okay.
And that's really what we are concerned with at the end of the day.
Okay. We have no further questions. Okay.
Questions or comments from the board at this time?
I just had one. So just so I'm clear, there are no tellers in the sportsbook area.
Well, we have, I think Kevin will give you the details on this. So there's like a 9 window cage, and certainly those cashiers will be handling, for AML purposes. If there's a transaction that hits one of those thresholds for an MTL, that'll drive the transaction to the cage.
How far is the cage from the sportsbook? Like, how far do I have to walk if I have an issue?
Actually 4 different discrete sportsbook areas. So how far is that from the cage?
So from the main cage, it's probably about 50 or 60 feet.
Can you just on the slide with the floor plan, where on, I don't see cage identified. Where is that? North, south, east, west?
I'll show you.
I'm just curious, if I'm up at the new sportsbook feature area and I have an issue, how far do I have to walk to get a live person?
So there's actually 2 places. The cage, there is a cage in the poker room immediately next door.
Okay.
Which is always manned with a cashier. And then, of course, there's our main cage, which if you look at the large diagram of the floor, on the bottom, the big blue square, which is the center bar,
yeah.
Directly above from that, you will see where it says the interior entrance to the sports book. Well, immediately to the left of that is the main cage.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Just one comment. The Erie being Erie in the winter, and although it's not the scope of the inquiry today, I can't wait to hear, even though I'll be gone, I'll be hearing, of a possible parking garage up there with you folks. I'll just leave you to take that back.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on a question that Commissioner Reitzel brought up. we've looked around. We've been out to some of the casinos, and the ones that we've seen so far that are doing sports books, there's a place where there's a live human being to take your bet. It's immediately adjacent. You've made is this a unique decision that you've made in Erie, or is this the way you've been doing sports books around the country?
This is the way we've done it in Mississippi. And just to give you some idea of the guest response, like I said, we have about 50% market share, and in a market where we're not the only sportsbook operators. In Mississippi, there's 28 casinos, 23 of them have sportsbooks. So it's a highly competitive set, and we have 50% of the market. And we believe strongly, and our guests tell us, it's because of the ease of using the kiosk versus waiting in line and interfacing and trying to make a wager with a person. Again, when you have even a 4 or 5 game parlay, that can be a pretty lengthy interaction, and one that doesn't provide the guest with the best experience. We also offer a variety of in-play wagering and live wagering, and the ability to do that pretty quickly is not only good for the guest, it's also good for us as operators. And so we want to be able to facilitate all of those things. And so we know that the guests love the kiosks. They tell us that. The ease by which, like I've been in these sportsbooks. I'm from Mississippi. And when I go in there on a Friday and a Saturday night, the people are 3 and 4 deep at these kiosks. We've had to order more kiosks. So this is the way that the market is going, and we're just being responsive to what the guest seems to want and still have that human asset available if need be.
To continue down that road, from your experience so far, from your expectations, I take it you see a slightly different profile in terms of age and whatnot of the kind of person who's going more likely to be doing sports books. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, and that also tracks what we've seen in Mississippi. I mean, we have 2 properties there in 2 relatively distinct markets, both along the Mississippi River, but one in Vicksburg and one in Greenville. And anecdotally, I can tell you that at our Vicksburg property, we see about 40% of people we've never seen before that are sports wagering customers. And at Harlow's, our Greenville property, that number jumps to 80%. So we're seeing folks that we've never seen before.
And how would you describe the profile of the person that you're now seeing? Are they younger? Well, how would you describe this?
I think it's and Alan can speak to this more, but my anecdotal observations is that certainly it's a male-dominated demographic that seems to be about 20 years younger than the typical 50, 55 female that we see in the slot machines.
Okay.
Agree.
Okay, well, the reason why I asked that question is being an old guy. I was guessing that the whole thrust here is that young people are used to playing around with kiosks and cell phones and all the rest of this, and it's only the old timers that really want the live human interaction, I think, and that's probably not your target audience. Is that fair?
I think that we want to be able to serve everybody, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I understand, but as a practical matter, you're making marketing decisions, you're making investment decisions based upon who you think your customers are. And is it fair to say that you're looking down the road at attracting a new group of people to the casino that's probably a different demographic than the traditional people who come to your casinos?
I think that's a fair statement.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
presentation.
I do have to make an oral amendment to our answer, whereby all references that we make in our answer to Presque Isle Downs Incorporated, since a change of control occurred on January 9th of this year, we'd like to orally amend our response and our conditions to replace Presque Isle Downs Incorporated with PID LLC, because they are the Category 1 licensee. And with that, the Office of Enforcement Counsel and various board staff have reviewed and consulted extensively on the petition filed by PID LLC to conduct sports wagering and for the issuance of a sports wagering certificate, after which we filed an answer in this matter and requested that the board implement certain listed conditions if it was so inclined. As a result, we have no objection to the approval of PID LLC's petition to conduct sports wagering and to the issuance of a sports wagering certificate subject to the proposed conditions outlined in our answer on January 2nd, 2019. And with that, if you have any questions for the Office of Enforcement Counsel, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay. Does petitioner have any comment or questions for Enforcement Counsel?
PID has no objection, Mr. Chairman, to the conditions set forth by the Office of Enforcement Counsel with regard to this petition.
Okay, no further questions from the board. Thank you. We'll take this matter up and vote on it later during the Office of Chief Counsel's presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I just would move for approval of our motion for confidential information that was submitted in accordance with this petition.
So moved.
And lastly, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of Presque Isle Downs and Churchill Downs and myself, I want to thank Commissioner Jewell for your service to this board and your contributions to Pennsylvania's gaming industry over the last 4 years. Thank you very much.
And I assume Mr. Hayes wants to move his presentation into the record also.
Yeah,
that's what I was waiting
we'll
for.
move the PowerPoint into evidence.
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts of our November 28th and February 19th, 2018 meetings. May I have such a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcripts of the November 28 and December 19, 2018 meetings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Commissioner O'Toole. Kevin. Commissioner. Executive Director O'Toole. We'll call you a commissioner for the heck of it.
Good morning, Chairman Barish and members of the board. I would like to take my opportunity this morning to express my appreciation on behalf of staff and myself to Commissioner Dick Jewell for your significant contribution to the success of the Gaming Control Board. We thank you very much for sharing with us over the past 4 years your experiences as an attorney, an educator, a historian, and drawing parallels from those experiences to many of the issues that we grapple with at the Gaming Control Board. So it is well deserved that you can add the moniker Exceptional Gaming Regulator to your list of personal accomplishments. It's been a true pleasure, and we wish you the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Kevin, very much.
I couldn't see you, Danette. Okay, our Director of Human Resources, Danette.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of one individual. Bradley McAllister has been selected as an Assistant Enforcement Counsel 1 under the Office of Enforcement Counsel. He has completed the interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by Chief Enforcement Counsel Cyrus Petrie. Unless you have questions, I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the hiring action as indicated.
May I have such a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicant for hire as proposed by the Human Resources Director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you, Danette.
Thank you.
Doug Sherman.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Our first agenda items relate to a final form regulation and a temporary regulation, which Assistant Chief Counsel Chad Zimmerman is here to present.
Thank you, Chad Zimmerman, ChadZimmermann. As alluded to by Chief Counsel Sherman, the first regulation packet number 125-204 regarding 2 table games, and the second regulation package number 125-222 regarding interactive gaming on multi-use computing devices, often referred to as airport gaming. The Office of Chief Counsel first presents for the board consideration Final Form Regulation 125-204. This Final Form rulemaking provides for the rules and procedures for 2 table games that may be offered at Pennsylvania casinos, Ford Card Prime and Cajun Stud. 4-Card Prime is a game where the goal is for the player to make the best 4-card poker hand out of 5 cards he or she is dealt, in an attempt to beat the dealer's best 4-card poker hand made out of the 6 cards he or she is dealt. The game also provides for additional side wagers the player can make. Cage and Stud is a game where the goal is for the player to make the best 5-card poker hand with the 2 cards dealt to the player and 3 community cards shared by all players. The dealer is dealt no hand in this game, and the player is playing against a posted pay table. The player wins if he creates a hand of jacks or better, pushes if he has a hand of 6s through 10s. The game also provides for additional side wagers. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on this packet of regulatory material. If not, I'd request a motion to approve final form regulation number 125-204.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the final form regulation number 125-204 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The second matter for the board's consideration is temporary regulation number 125-222. These temporary regulations, which encompass Chapter 830 of Subpart L, cover all aspects of interactive gaming certificate holder or an interactive gaming operator offering interactive gaming through the use of multi-use computing devices at a qualified airport in an airport gaming area. These regulations address the requirements for board authorization, petition requirements in the standard of review, licensure requirements for entities and persons involved, accounting and internal controls, requirements for ensuring only those eligible may play and how players may deposit and withdraw funds for play, and compulsive and problem gaming matters. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on this packet of regulatory material. If not, I'd request a motion to approve temporary regulation 125-222.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board adopt temporary regulation number 125-222 as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, the board has 4 petitions before it for consideration. One of those matters was heard earlier today during the public hearing, and the remaining 3 petitions will be decided based upon the documentary records. In each of the matters, all pleadings and any other matters filed of record have been provided to the board in advance of this meeting. As indicated, the first petition is that of Presque Isle Downs and their request to be issued a sports wagering certificate. The matter was heard a short time ago, and should the board approve the request for the sports wagering certificate, to be clear, it will not be authorizing Presque Isle to commence sports wagering at this time, but rather sports wagering will only become operational after further review and testing has occurred, and the board has given the board staff through casino compliance and the executive director have given the final authorization. They will also be required to complete a successful test period. As with all sports wagering petitions, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has requested a series of conditions to be issued, subject to the oral modification of the name and the conditions that have been previously issued. In addition, there is a request to maintain certain portions of the record as confidential, and we would request that would be appropriate, and the matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Presque Isle Downs' petition for issuance of a sports wagering certificate and authorization to conduct sports wagering as described by the Office of Chief Counsel and with the conditions that will be outlined in the board's order. I further move that Presque Isle's request for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter is Howard Concrete Pumping Company's petition for removal from the board's prohibited gaming service provider list. In June of 2008, Howard Concrete submitted an application indicating that its majority stockholder, Frank Howard Jr., had not been the subject of any investigation of any type. That statement was true at the time. However, during the course of the background investigation, it was reported that Mr. Howard later was the subject of a 2009 investigation in Las Vegas stemming from a child custody dispute. And while Mr. Howard was obligated to update board staff to indicate that such a investigation had begun. He had failed to do so. The Office of Enforcement Counsel had issued a notice recommending denial of Howard Concrete's application. A hearing was not requested, and the application was subsequently denied, and Howard Concrete was placed on the prohibited gaming service provider list as a result. It's now been 9 years since that action, and Howard Concrete is requesting to be removed from the list, indicating that the issues giving rise to that placement have been resolved, and the matter is now appropriate for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Howard Concrete Pumping Company, Inc.'s petition to be removed from the prohibited gaming service provider list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is LaToya Butler's request for reconsideration of the board's prior denial of her gaming employee occupation permit. By way of background, in July 2018, Ms. Butler submitted a renewal application with regard to her employment at Harrah's Philadelphia as a table game dealer. During the background investigation, it was discovered that she was non-compliant with the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue's filing requirements. The Bureau of Licensing notified Ms. Butler of her status with DOR and of the Bureau of Investigation Enforcement contacted her several times regarding her non-compliance status. In October of 2018, OEC sent her a notice recommending denial of her renewal application based upon the outstanding tax issues. Unfortunately, Ms. Butler did not respond to the recommended denial, and the board issued an order this past December denying her renewal. After receiving the order, Ms. Butler did file a request for reconsideration and has brought herself into compliance with the DOR requirements. OEC has confirmed that she's now in good standing with the Department of Revenue, and it no longer has an objection to the renewal of her permit, and that matter is ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve LaToya Butler's petition for reconsideration of the denial of her gaming employee occupation permit renewal and that her permit, I should say, be renewed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The final petition before the board is Tiara Lee's request for removal from the board's involuntary exclusion list. On July 31st, 2013, Ms. Lee assisted a 20-year-old in accessing the Valley Forge Casino's gaming floor. Ms. Lee was evicted from the casino for her actions, and the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. Lee on the involuntary exclusion list. The board on September 17th of 2014 issued an order to place her on the exclusion list for at least 1 year from the date of the order, after which she could petition to come off the list. It's now been over 4 years since she was placed on the exclusion list, and Ms. Lee is now requested to be removed. OEC has no objection, and that's the request then pending before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves Tara Lee's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And next, presenting one report and recommendation is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Good morning. As indicated, the board has next for its consideration one report and recommendation received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. The report and recommendation, as well as the complete evidentiary record in this matter, has been provided to the board in advance of this meeting. And additionally, the subject of the report and recommendation, Tangelia Clark, has been notified that the board would be taking her up today and that she could come forward and briefly address the board. If Ms. Clark is present in the room, I'd ask her to come forward at this time. Briefly, in September of 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. Clark on the board's involuntary exclusion list after discovering that during the early morning hours of August 8, 2017, Ms. Clark's children, ages 9 and 3, were left alone in a hotel room at the Valley Forge Casino Resort while she gamed. A hearing in this matter was held on December 5, 2017. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared offering testimony and documentary evidence. Ms. Clark also appeared pro se and testified on her own behalf. The evidence presented at that hearing indicated that during the early morning hours of August 8th, Ms. Clark's two young children, or the older of the two young children, called hotel staff and asked if they could find her mother. Valley Forge staff subsequently located Ms. Clark on the gaming floor at approximately 2:45 a.m. and escorted her back to her hotel room, where she was met by police. Ms. Clark and her children were then evicted from the property by Valley Forge staff, and upon being informed that her and her children had to leave the property, Ms. Clark contacted her 20-year-old daughter to come and pick them up. Upon the arrival of her daughter, the 20-year-old daughter, she was interviewed by police officers, and the 20-year-old indicated to police that she was present in the hotel earlier in the evening until approximately 10 o'clock p.m., and in fact it was her that left the siblings alone in the hotel room, her mother having left the hotel room approximately 10 or 15 minutes earlier. Ms. Clark also testified that her eldest daughter was in the room with the younger children when she left to game at the casino. Valley Forge records corroborate that Ms. Clark did enter the gaming floor at approximately 9:49 p.m. After hearing all of the evidence presented, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation, the report and recommendation that's presently before the board. In it, the hearing officer notes that although parts of Ms. Clark's testimony seemed disjointed and embellished, her 20-year-old daughter's statement to police that she left the children alone in the room and casino records, which seemed to confirm the timeline presented, caused him to find that the Office of Enforcement Counsel had not met its burden of proof in this matter relative to Ms. Clark, and as a result, the hearing officer recommends in the report and recommendation that Ms. Clark not be placed on the exclusion list. I would note for the record that since the issuance of the report and recommendation in this matter, the Office of Chief Counsel has confirmed that Ms. Clark has now pleaded guilty to 2 counts of recklessly endangering another person as a result of this incident. That information is correctly before the board. It is a matter of public information. And now this matter is ready for the board's consent.
Are there any questions or comments from the board before we take a vote?
Mr. Chairman, it's Sean.
Commissioner Logan, go ahead.
Steve, did I hear you right that Valley Forge, first of all, I can see by the screen, is Miss Clark not there?
She is not.
Okay. What time did Valley Forge evict, if that's the proper word, the Clarks?
What time were they evicted? I'm sorry, was that your? Sometime after 2:45. I don't have an exact time, but sometime after 2:45 a.m.
Okay. Okay. Just a comment that everybody knows how I feel about parents who leave their kids in a room or a hotel. As stupid as that is, I think it's just as stupid for Valley Forge, and I'm going on an assumption, at 2:45 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., to kick a mother and 3 kids out of a hotel. There had to be another way. Hopefully that's not what happened, and it was 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. I would appreciate if Cyrus or somebody could look into that. But to kick a mom and 3 kids out, regardless of the issue, just seems really asinine to me.
Any further comments? We'll see if we can get that information back to you, Sean. If there are no other comments, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board reject the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Tangelia Clark's placement on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list, and that Ms. Clark be placed on the exclusion list.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No.
No, I didn't get to that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sean, are you voting?
Yes, I voted aye.
Okay. All opposed?
No.
No.
No. We do not have a.
No.
The failure of the board
Do
to
not
reach
have a super
qualified majority would indicate
So the
that
motion fails.
the motion fails.
Thank you. I voted no, just for the record. Okay.
And with the motion failing, then the status quo would remain that she would not be on the list,
I
to
see.
be clear. And that concludes the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Thank you. Next, we have Bureau of Licensing.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Before the board today will be one fantasy contest operator, one interactive gaming manufacturer, one gaming-related gaming service provider, and 20 video game establishments. Also, there will be 635 principal and key gaming and non-gaming employee applicants. In addition, there will be the consideration of one gaming service provider applicant and 2 registered gaming service providers. The first matter for consideration is the Fantasy Contest Operator License for Crown PA DFS Incorporated, doing business as DraftKings Incorporated. Crown PA DFS Incorporated, DraftKings, is a Boston, Massachusetts-based company that offers fantasy gaming throughout the U.S. and internationally. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with the draft order and ask that the board consider the order to approve the fantasy contest license for Crown PA DFS.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant Crown PADFS Inc.'s fantasy contest license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is an interactive gaming manufacturer license for Konami Gaming Incorporated. Konami Gaming Incorporated is currently licensed in good standing with the board as a slot, table game, and VGT manufacturer. Under the Gaming Act, the board may use an abbreviated process to consider the applicant of an already licensed manufacturer. The Bureau of Licensing, Office of Enforcement Counsel, and the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement have reviewed the application and the status of the company as a licensee. And I have provided you with the results of these reviews. I have also provided you with a draft order for the applicant and asked that you consider Konami Gaming for licensure as an interactive gaming manufacturer.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board reject the report. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Konami Gaming Inc.'s interactive gaming manufacturer abbreviated license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration is the approval of a gaming-related gaming service provider certification for Casino Over Under LLC. Casino Over Under is a Tampa, Florida-based company that has developed a new card game called Casino Over Under. The Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement has completed its investigation of this company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with the background investigation and suitability report for this applicant. I have provided you with the draft order for this entity and ask that the board consider the approval of a gaming-related gaming service provider certification for Casino Over Under LLC.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Casino Over Under LLC's certified gaming-related gaming service provider license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next are conditional VGT establishment licenses for truck stops seeking to place VGTs in their establishments. The applicants are CHR Corp., doing business as Rudder Stores. The following numbers are 4, 5, 8, 15, 16, 17, 23, 34, 36, 37, 56, 60, 65, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, and 79. Under the Gaming Act, the board may issue a conditional establishment license provided the applicant has never been convicted of a felony, is current on state taxes, has submitted a complete application, and has not been convicted of a gaming law violation. A preliminary review of these applicants indicates they meet these criteria. It should be clear that this is strictly a conditional approval and that final approval will be based on the applicant meeting all of the eligibility criteria provided in the statute. A final eligibility determination shall follow investigation and site investigations by the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement. I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the conditional VGT establishment licenses.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Any questions from the board on this matter? I just have a question just to clarify things for the record. The eligibility requirement relate to things like whether or not they've been convicted of something. At this point, the Bureau of Licensing has not reviewed, when you said the other conditions, those are things like how many gallons of diesel fuel they're pumping, whether or not they have all the various things in place necessary to run this, whether or not they have the adequate number of tractor-trailer parking and whatnot. So this, what we're voting on today, does not relate to any of those matters, just to the initial eligibility. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is strictly preliminary.
Okay. And we're required by law to have done this, what, within 60 days of when these applications are filed? Or something like that, 60 or 90?
90 days of a
Okay.
completed application.
Okay, just want to make sure the record's clear on what we're voting on and what we're not voting on today. In that instance, can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the conditional video gaming terminal establishment licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you.
In addition, there are principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 5 principals and 3 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants the principal and key employee licensees as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next are temporary key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 9 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the temporary key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 438 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 144 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
There is also the recommendation of denial for 2 gaming employee applicants. The applicants were notified that they were being recommended for denial and failed to request hearings within the specified timeframes. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with an order addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider the motions approving these denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each matter.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board deny the applications for gaming employee occupation permits as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration are withdrawal requests for key and gaming employees. In each case, the license, permit, or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I have provided the board with a list of 1 key and 7 gaming employees. Ask that the board consider the order approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the withdrawal of the key employee application and gaming employee occupation permit applications described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next, we have an order to certify the following gaming service provider, Macero Corporation. I ask that the board consider the order approving the gaming service provider for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the application of Macero Corporation for a gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 2 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants for gaming service provider registration described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes the Bureau of Licensing matters.
Thank you, Sean. Office of Enforcement Counsel.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 10 matters today for the board's consideration, in which we will request the board's approval of 2 consent agreements, 1 suspension, and 7 involuntary exclusions. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Presque Isle Downs and Casino. The consent agreement will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel Sarah Colasar. Representatives from Presque Isle are present, and at this time I ask that they introduce themselves for the record, and that anyone not here as an attorney please stand and be sworn.
Kevin Hayes again on behalf of PID and Churchill Downs Incorporated.
Kathy Beating, Senior Counsel and Corporate Compliance Officer for CDI.
Kevin O'Sullivan, Vice President, General Manager for Presque Isle Downs.
I presume they've already been sworn. We have to swear them in again.
That's correct.
Okay.
Good morning, Sarah Kolesar, Kolesar, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. This proposed consent agreement involves 2 counts of table games violations which occurred at Presque Isle Downs and Casino. The first count of this consent agreement involves the commingling of a blue king of hearts with a red set of cards that was utilized at a blackjack table in violation of the Act, the board's regulations, and Presque Isle's internal controls. On January 19, 2018, a red set of cards and a blue set of cards was utilized at a blackjack table. A table games dealer removed the blue set of cards from the shuffler at the table, had a patron cut the blue set of cards, place the blue set of cards back into the shoe, and then burned a card by putting the first card in the discard rack. Shortly thereafter, the dealer removed the blue set of cards from the shoe and reinserted them into the shuffler. At that time, the dealer did not remove the blue burn card from the discard rack. The blue card was later identified as a blue king of hearts. Because the blue king of hearts was left in the discard rack, the blue card was inadvertently shuffled in with the red set of cards. As a result, the red set of cards had an extra card in its shoe. The compromised blue king of hearts was in a live shoe of red cards 3 times before it was discovered. Further, the blue king of hearts was dealt to a patron twice. Over the course of 1 hour and 6 minutes, the compromised red set was in play. Approximately 62 hands were dealt. During this time, the air lights on the shuffler at the blackjack table were not sufficiently addressed on 4 separate instances. As a result of this violation, 2 Presque Isle employees received corrective action notices from their supervisors. Presque Isle was able to identify 5 patrons that were playing blackjack during the time the cards were compromised and lost money. Presque Isle mailed each of the patrons a gift card in an attempt to reimburse them for their play. Presque Isle promptly reported this violation to the Bureau of Casino Compliance. The second count of this consent agreement occurred on November 3, 2017, where a red deck of cards was missing an ace of diamonds, was put into rotation out of a poker table for approximately 9 hours and 30 minutes. The red deck was in play for approximately 4 hours and 40 minutes. During this time, the red deck was put into play 10 times in total, and 126 hands of poker were dealt utilizing the compromised deck. Prior to the compromised deck being put into the rotation, the deck was inspected by a tables game pit manager and a tables game dealer. At the time of both inspections, the red deck did not contain an ace of diamonds. During the 9 hours and 30 minutes that the red deck was in rotation, not one poker dealer counted the red deck of cards or any deck of cards used in play during that time. Table games personnel discovered that the red deck was compromised, while a table games dealer was examining the cards upon preparation to close the poker table. Presque Isle conducted a review to determine when the ace of diamonds went missing from the red deck. However, the review was inconclusive and the missing ace of diamonds was never located. As a result of this violation, 10 Presque Isle employees received corrective action notices from their supervisors. Presque Isle promptly reported this violation to the Bureau of Casino Compliance. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the Board approve this consent agreement between the parties. The terms of the settlement include that within 5 days of the board's order approving this consent agreement, Presque Isle shall pay a civil penalty of $22,500. Also within 5 days of the board's order approving this consent agreement, Presque Isle shall pay the board an administrative fee in the amount of $2,500. If you have any questions, we would be happy to address them at this time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, unless you have some comments. You'd like to
Just
make.
very briefly, Mr. Chairman, the consent agreement that is before the board for your consideration was entered by the prior owner, El Dorado Resorts, as the incidents giving rise to the consent agreement occurred prior to Churchill Downs' acquisition of the property. We have been assured by the management team under the leadership of Kevin O'Sullivan that they have worked with the board members, specifically the Office of Casino Compliance, the Office of Enforcement Counsel, to put in policies and procedures to ensure this does not occur again. While this appears to be a deviation from the normal practices, the board should rest assured that Churchill Downs takes these regulatory violations very serious, and we will continue to monitor those operations in the table games departments to ensure this doesn't occur again.
Appreciate that. Thank you. If no further comments, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Presque Isle Downs, Inc., as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mount Airy Casino Resort. The consent agreement will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel David Tepper. Representatives from Mount Airy, Mr. Scalar is here on behalf of Mount Airy Casino Resort. I'd request that Mr. Scalar introduce himself into the record and spell his name for the court reporter.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael Scalar, S-K-L-A-R, on behalf of Mount Airy No. 1 LLC.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, T-E-P-P-E-R, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The proposed consent agreement includes an incident in which Mount Airy Casino violated its beverage service policy. On February 28, 2018, MG, a patron at Mount Airy, was served 8 alcoholic beverages in a 1 hour and 29-minute period by one cocktail server. MG was served 5 beers and 3 shots while he played poker. MG finished consuming his last drink at 2:25 a.m. MG played poker until approximately 5:26 a.m., and from approximately 5:28 a.m. until 7:17 a.m., he played a combination of craps and blackjack. MG departed Mount Airy at approximately 7:28 a.m. after receiving his vehicle from the valet attendants. At no time did MG appear visibly intoxicated based upon a review of surveillance footage. At approximately 7:40 a.m., MG was involved in a fatal motor vehicle accident. Since the consent agreement was entered into, MG pled guilty to 1 count of homicide by vehicle while driving under the influence. On February 1st, 2017, representatives of Mount Airy appeared before the board regarding a proposed consent agreement for an intoxicated patron involving an individual with the initials TS. At that time, Mount Airy's representatives informed the board that if a patron consumed 3 drinks in a 1-hour period, a beverage supervisor would be contacted to assess the situation. On July 12, 2017, representatives of Mount Airy again appeared before the board in regards to an incident where there was a violation of Mount Airy's alcohol service policy. At that time, Mount Airy advised that they had purchased Boss. Boss is the beverage ordering service system provided by Bally's, which allows Mount Airy to automatically track alcohol service for Mount Airy player card patrons and set minimum time intervals between beverage orders, establish maximum number of drinks within a set time period, and other beverage service limitations. Further, timely installation of Boss was a term of the consent agreement between Mount Airy and the Office of Enforcement Counsel, which was approved by the board on July 12, 2017. Boss had not yet been installed by Mount Airy on February 28, 2018. Boss was installed at Mount Airy in October of 2018. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board approve this consent agreement between the parties. The terms of the settlement include that within 5 days of the board's order approving this consent agreement, Mount Airy shall pay a civil penalty of $250,000 for the alleged violations described. Also, within 5 days of the board's order approving this consent agreement, Mount Airy shall pay the board $2,500 for the costs incurred by OEC, BIE, and other related staff in connection with this matter. If you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them at this time.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Do you have anything you want to say at this point, Michael?
Not at this time.
Okay. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between Office of Enforcement Counsel and Mount Airy No. 1 LLC described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda consists of an enforcement action in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint seeking the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Jennifer Remach. The complaint has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon Ms. Remach, who failed to respond to the complaint within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon Ms. Remach. Therefore, the facts in the complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matter is presently ripe for Board consideration. Assistant Enforcement Counsel Thomas Monahan will provide a brief summation and request the appropriate Board action.
Good morning, Thomas Monahan, Monaghan, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next matter on the agenda for the Board's consideration is a suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Jennifer Remach. Ms. Remach pled guilty to misdemeanor simple assault in connection with a physical altercation with the father of her child and his girlfriend. At this time, OEC requests that the Board suspend the non-gaming employee registration issued to Jennifer Remach.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve a 6-month suspension of Jennifer Remach's non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration. In each instance, if the Board orders the proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of the inimical conduct will be placed on the Board's public website.
Good morning. Once again, Thomas Monahan with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the Board's consideration is a request to place Tyler Chapin on the Board's involuntary exclusion list. On September 14, 2018, while exiting Hollywood Casino, Mr. Chapin and his companion became involved in a confrontation with security in which Mr. Chapin threatened to retrieve a gun from his car and come back to the casino. While driving off the property, Mr. Chapin stopped at the horse statue located near the entrance to Hollywood's parking lot and discharged his gun out of the driver's side window towards the statue. Mr. Chapin was later arrested and charged by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, OEC requests the Board place Tyler Chapin on the Board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the addition of Tyler Chapin to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the Board's consideration is the request to place Dominic Cardamone on the exclusion list. On March 30th, 2018, Mr. Cardamone left a 10-year-old child alone in his vehicle for 28 minutes prior to the child being located by security at the Rivers Casino. During this time, Mr. Cardamone engaged in gaming activity for approximately 19 minutes. The temperature on this date was 38 degrees. Mr. Cardamone was located and turned over to Pennsylvania State Police, who later escorted him from the casino. Mr. Cardamone later that day called the casino and spoke with a security employee to whom he issued threats and used abusive language. Pennsylvania State Police filed 1 count of terroristic threats and endangering the welfare of children and 6 motor vehicle summary offenses against Mr. Cardamone. This time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the placement of Dominic Cardamone on the PGCB's exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Dominic Cardamone to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Richard Michael Gress Jr. on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On 4 separate days in June of 2018, Mr. Gress was discovered to be cheating while playing Mississippi Stud Poker at the Meadows Casino. On June 20th, 2018, Mr. Gress was discovered to be marking cards while playing Mississippi Stud Poker, and after a review of Mr. Gress's previous visits to the Meadows, it was discovered that he had also marked cards on at least 3 previous dates. Due to his cheating activity, Mr. Gress was criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, OEC requests that the board place Richard Michael Gress Jr. on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves the addition of Richard Michael Gress Jr. to the BGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ashley Gabriel, Gabrielle, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a petition for the exclusion of Lisa Marie Davis. In October 2015, Ms. Davis was ejected from Valley Forge Casino Resort for undesirable behavior and attempting to use another patron's player's card. Ms. Davis violated the ban and was permanently evicted from Valley Forge Casino. Ms. Davis violated the permanent eviction in March 2018 when she was found at Valley Forge Casino with cocaine and paraphernalia in her possession and as a result was criminally charged. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board exclude Lisa Marie Davis.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves the addition of Lisa Marie Davis to the BGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Dustin Miller once again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the request to place Daniel Maloney on the exclusion list. On April 5th, 2018, Mr. Maloney entered the Rivers Casino and engaged in blackjack play. During his play, Mr. Maloney cheated by pinching his bets 18 times and capping a winning bet once. The total won by Mr. Maloney due to the capping of bets was $550. Of this amount, $325 was recovered by security prior to his ejection from the casino for an outstanding loss of $225 to the casino. Mr. Maloney was permanently banned by the casino. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the placement of Daniel Maloney on the PGCB exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Daniel Maloney to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Benjamin Farrell, Ferrell. Next matter for consideration is a petition to place Stephen Reese Jr. on the exclusion list. Mr. Reese threw objects at a table game supervisor while gaming at Harrah's Philadelphia Casino and Racetrack. The Pennsylvania State Police charged Mr. Reese with simple assault and harassment. Harrah's Philadelphia permanently evicted Mr. Reese from its facility. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Stephen Reese Jr. on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Stephen Reese to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
David Tepper again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a request to place Buddy Shum on the involuntary exclusion list. While a patron at Parks, Mr. Shum passed fraudulent American Express traveler's checks. As a result of his conduct, Mr. Shum was criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Buddy Shum to the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Buddy Shum to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel, Commissioner Jewell, we wish you well, and we thank you for your service and your support that you provided staff throughout your tenure. And with that, that concludes our business.
Thank you, Cyrus. Well, that concludes today's meeting. The next public meeting will be held on Wednesday, March 6th at 10 a.m. in this room. Perhaps Mr. Jewell will be with us, perhaps he won't.
Down to the final.
Get down to the final time. Anyway, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. We are adjourned. Thank you, one and all.